Welcome to City Inside Out Council Edition. I'm your host, Brian Callanan. The Seattle City Council is in a race to finish its comprehensive plan, the city's roadmap to future growth. But a last-minute legal challenge and a looming deadline from the state are raising new questions about this process. Plus, the council has to reckon with a new social housing measure that city leaders unsuccessfully opposed in the February election. I'm with Councilmembers Joy Hollingsworth and Mark Solomon to discuss these topics and the questions you're sending in too. Next on Council Edition.
Voters responded. They want housing. They want social housing. We want to make it successful. That's the bottom line.
When we saw before when the less lethal weapons were banned, it basically left officers with sticks and guns.
All that and more coming up next on City Inside Out Council Edition. I'm Brian Callanan. Thanks for joining us once again on City Inside Out Council Edition, right here on the Seattle channel. And with us for this episode, we have Councilmember Joy Hollingsworth, who represents District 3 from Capitol Hill to Montlake. Thanks you very much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Also, we have with us Seattle's newest council member, Mark Solomon, appointed to the job in late January to represent District 2 in Southeast Seattle. Great to see you, too.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, and the new guy always goes first, so I want to direct this question to you if I could, Mark. Okay. I thought it was very interesting during the appointment process that you told the council and the public that you were going to be a caretaker in this position. You would not run in November to finish out the term of Tammy Morales, who stepped down from the council in January. I want you to talk about that and what you're bringing to this job, which is clearly not an election campaign.
Okay. So I was very clear that when I was seeking the appointment that I wanted to be a caretaker, primarily for a couple of reasons. One is I know how difficult it is to do a full-time job and run for a full-time job. And
You've run for office a number of times before.
Yes, I've run for it before, and I know how much energy it takes. And I did not want to be distracted from the work, doing the work on council, by also trying to campaign. So by committing to being a caretaker, I can focus on getting the work of this council done and then do a warm handoff to whoever the voters decide that they want to have represent them this coming November.
Got it. All right. Another rite of passage on City Inside Out Council Edition, answering a question from a viewer. And I want to throw this one at you, a viewer who knows you have a short amount of time on the job. Here we go. What are concrete, actionable policies you will implement this year to provide Black working people and families a more stable cost of living? Some thoughts.
Okay. Well, there's a couple of things I'm thinking about. One is I want to revisit the gig worker pay issue. I've heard from several different sides already being in this position, and I know the impact it's taking on, that it's impacting on the workers that are having less
work to do? Or,
less work to do, more idle time in between jobs, in between orders, the impact that it's having on our restaurant industry. So I'm wondering, can we revisit that? Can we look at that? Can we tweak that so that the workers can still get a fair wage and they can work more hours, and our restaurants can also benefit from the increased revenue, because they've seen a decline in revenue. So that's one. Another thing I'm focused on is making sure that people know what resources are out there and available for them to stay in their homes. The Office of Planning and Community Development has a number of anti-displacement programs already on the books.
Not a lot of people use them, unfortunately.
Because not a lot of people know about them. So one of the things I want to do is make sure that we do some sessions in the district, maybe at the Rainier Beach Community Center in a couple of months. With interpretation. Bring the Office of Planning and Community Development out there so they can tell folks, here's what we have available for you to keep you in your homes. So that's going to be one of the priorities that I have as well. So anti-displacement,
Working with
pushing
gig
back,
workers, yeah, okay.
working with the gig workers. So those are just two things that I have on my mind right now.
Okay, all right, thank you. And I'm going to hear a little bit more, I know, in a bit. But I did want to ask Councilmember Hollingsworth, I know you're excited about having Councilmember Solomon on board. I saw you post a couple weeks ago, your fellow Seattle Prep Panther right over here. What's it going to be like working with Councilmember Solomon, and what's he bringing to the table?
Yeah, Councilmember Solomon is phenomenal. He's bringing a steady hand to the table. He's bringing a listening voice. He's bringing passion, love for the district. He knows all the communities within the district. He has a really great background of navigating the city as well. He has hit the ground running, and when I say running, he's at a full sprint right now. So we're excited to have him as a colleague and to be able to work with him.
Okay, she should do some testimonials for you at some point. I can't wait to learn more on that. All right, I wanted to move on to what Mayor Harrell was talking about here very recently in his State of the City address, talking about a city that, as he sees it, is on the right track. Here's a clip.
And I think there's a different mood in the city, a different spirit, if you will, a renewed spark, a renewed belief and optimism that we are on the right trajectory. Now, to put that feeling into words and to claim our action, we describe it as Seattle being on the rise.
Councilmember Hollingsworth, I'm going to assume you agree with the sentiment that we have a city on the rise. It's important to stay positive as a city leader, but I wanted to get to why. What do you point to in your district or citywide to say there's the evidence that Seattle's on the right track?
Yeah, you always have to stay optimistic, but you also have to be realistic about things as well. When I'm talking to people, going to like different communities through the neighborhood or also grocery stores, anywhere I'm seeing people and interacting on the bus, you get this feeling of hope and optimism that people feel like the tone is different at the council, that they feel like the city is like moving in the right direction. And also, you know, when you're talking to folks, they also feel like, hey, you know, we want the city to work for us, to be able to navigate city departments. Our office is completely focused on constituent services and neighborhoods, and hey, this is being like a traffic control person,
sure,
right, to navigate different city departments. And people have responded well to that because they just want the city to function. There's obviously some areas of improvement, but I feel like we have a lot to look forward to. The waterfront, Pike Pine Core, all the investments that are coming into the city, the sports, everything. It's very hopeful.
Okay. Councilmember Solomon, maybe I'll go to you here. And just with this idea of optimism and realism, Mayor Harrell was quick to point out in his address it wasn't time to hang up a mission accomplished banner or anything like that. Right. And I think about these things because the city is starting to meet its goal of hiring more officers, but the progress has been very slow. The data shows the number of encampments, they're down, but we still have thousands of people who don't have homes in our area. What were your takeaways from the mayor's message? What are you going to do to support this effort of Seattle on the rise?
Well, the message I took away is, listening to what the mayor's priorities are in terms of moving us even further forward, like permitting reform, for example. Okay, that's something that desperately needs to happen.
Yeah, he's talking about cutting that time in half. That's
and it needs
big.
To, and I would like to see that time cut even more.
Okay.
And I think we can do that with the plans that he currently has in place by streamlining the process, having like a one-stop shop as opposed to the current system where you have different people, from different agencies with different expertise and different
design review, all these things.
All these things that really do slow things down. So if we can expedite things, make it easier to build in the city, I think that's definitely going to help. The visions that we have for, well, I would say we're already a world-class city.
Okay.
We get the Club Cup coming this year.
FIFA's going to be a big deal with the World Cup.
We got the World Cup coming next year. Right. So we're going to have thousands, hundreds of thousands of people coming to our city, and I want to be able to highlight all of our neighborhoods. Right. Again, downtown Stadium District is going to get a lot of attention, but I want people to go down to Columbia City and partake in some island soul action.
You bet. I know what you're saying.
Or get some French toast at Geraldine's. Right? I want the folks to come up in the CID and enjoy the richness and the vitality that they have there. Go to the Wing Luke Museum while you're in between matches.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Take advantage of the cultural diversity that we have here, and on that issue of diversity, right?
Yeah.
We are embracing our diversity. We are embracing our inclusion. We are embracing our equity. We shouldn't run from it.
Can I stop you for a second? Because you're going down a path that I definitely want to broaden out here, because the mayor was saying in his address that he has some grave concerns for what the Trump administration has in store for Seattle and its people. As he did in his first term, the president has threatened to withhold federal funding from places like Seattle with so-called sanctuary city status when it comes to immigration policy. Seattle and many other jurisdictions have filed lawsuits against the Trump administration over this, and the council has stood up a new committee specifically to deal with federal policy changes as proposed by Councilmember Rink. Councilmember Hollingsworth, let me start with you. I don't want to scare people, but I just want to get real about your concerns about the president and what you can do about it, what you want to do about it as a city council member.
Yeah, this is why we feel lucky to live in Washington State. We have a great governor that is going to continue to protect us. We have an attorney general that has filed a ton of lawsuits already against the Trump administration. We have an executive that has, said, hey, we are standing up to the administration that threatens any Seattle values. Every layer of government, we have protection. City council is, one of the front porch of the city, and looking forward to working with the selective committee on federal issues that are coming to our city.
Starting up in March, right?
Absolutely coming, so that's going to be great for us. But I do feel hopeful that we do have every branch of government working collaboratively and together to make sure that we're protecting our Seattle values that we all, from diversity, equity, inclusion to our immigrant community, all these different layers that make Seattle what it is. We have the protections, I feel, ready, in order for us to make sure that we're protecting folks in Seattle.
When people ask you about it and they're saying, are we going to lose some money? I mean, what do you say to them?
Yeah, at this time you say, hey, we don't know, but we are exploring options in different ways. With all the city departments have been directed to understand, hey, what money comes from federal, what money comes from state, what comes from county, all these different layers, so we can figure out how we can be protected and what that looks like. People are working behind the scenes every single day. Every day we get an update regarding what's going on in the administration, and it can be like a lot, and that's why sometimes I don't watch the news. I look for the updates from people officially.
Sure.
So, I do feel confident that we will be able to handle some of the stuff that's going to be thrown at us.
Okay, thank you. And Councilmember Solomon, I wanted to keep going down the path that you started here, because I think about the very diverse district you represent in D2 there, the amount of immigrant families that I know are there. I have to think they're very anxious about what's going on right now. What's your message to them? What's your message to the city, I guess, when it comes to how you're responding to what the Trump administration is doing?
Well, one thing that I was at the South Precinct Advisory Council meeting last week, and questions did come up about, and they always have come up, in the community, about interactions with law enforcement. Can I trust to interact with law enforcement? Can I trust to report something?
Right.
And not be afraid that I'm going to get snatched up.
Yeah, I've heard from some advocates who are saying sometimes people aren't taking kids to school or accessing health care, too.
Right. And the message was, that I've been, giving has been very clear, and the message that the precinct command staff also gave was very clear, is that the Seattle Police Department does not care about a person's immigration status.
Yeah, they're not allowed to ask.
They don't even ask. Right. What they're concerned about is someone calls because they need help, we want to get them help. And again, don't care about the status. And that's what I'm continuing to say, is like, if you need assistance, if you need us to be of service to you, that's our job. Okay. Our job is not to worry about whether what your immigration status is. Our job is to be of service.
Are you concerned about that potential loss of funding, though? Because that's...
I am. Okay. I am concerned about the loss of funding, and some of the meetings that I've had with some of our organizations that are out there in community doing work that currently are on the books to receive federal funds. I'm asking them, so is your funding in jeopardy? Okay, and what do we need to do to fill that gap if that funding does become in jeopardy? When we were involved in the appointment process, I think Councilmember Rink asked about the basically the threat of withholding funding from, of funding being withheld from the federal government, and my response was, okay, if they want to withhold funding, fine, we'll find our own money.
Okay.
Right. Okay. And that's what I'm thinking about. How can we insulate ourselves from what may be coming towards us, right? Whether that's funding, whether it's, dismantling of certain programs, all the things that seem to be happening, that the only reason I can think of that they are happening is cruelty and chaos. So how do we insulate ourselves from that, and how do we demonstrate that in Seattle, we are going to embrace our diversity, we are going to advance equity, and we are going to be inclusive?
Thank you. On a bit of a lighter note, Councilmember Hollingsworth, I wanted to ask you this. You've played the game of basketball a little bit in your time.
A little bit.
You're a bit of a fan. When the mayor said in his address, "I have an announcement to make," brought out a basketball, everybody thought he was talking about the Sonics coming back. Then he said, "Just kidding." I had a tough time laughing at that. I wanted to get your reaction. What'd you think?
Yeah, I had a tough time as well. I thought it was a funny joke.
Oh, he got us. That's for sure.
He got us, and you know, my uncle played it for the Sonics back in the '70s. Out Seals. He came here from New Orleans, and it's my mom's brother, my uncle, and that's how my family got to Seattle. So it was, you know, it touched a little nerve, but I knew he was joking. It was all fun and games, and it's fine.
All right. Well, I need to get back to business here, and I'm going to talk about the comprehensive plan. And Councilmember Hollingsworth, you're in charge of the committee that is overseeing the comp plan, the roadmap to growth in Seattle. There was a public hearing, as you know, earlier this month, quite a long one. As you also know, the council heard from a number of people, some saying, go for it, we need this plan, plus even more growth. Then others were saying, this is the first time we're hearing about this. This is going to have negative impacts on my neighborhood. Then a week later, a group of people in your district, the Friends of Madison Park, filed an appeal asking the city hearing examiner for a supplemental environmental impact study on this plan. This is one of 6 groups that have now filed an appeal. At the time we're recording this program, a date for that appeal has not been set, but as I understand it, the clock is really ticking for the city now to comply with this state measure, House Bill 1110, that says, okay, single-family zoning, that's a thing in the past. This is set to go in effect in July of this year. Is the city going to meet that deadline?
Yeah, so we're still on track to continue to push the process forward. Does it mess up our timeline for a little bit of comprehensive plan, you know, depending on some of the challenges that have been brought forth? We won't know until we have an executive session with our law department to understand what are the legal implications of these 6 challenges that have come forth with the city. But I want to be clear, because the comprehensive plan, how incredibly important it is to our city, to people that want to buy a home, to people that want, you know, different how their neighborhoods designed, grocery stores. We want it to be a welcoming city, an accessible city, an affordable city, a livable city, and a safe city. We want all those things within our community, and so we're going to continue to push this process forward, but we are going to have to understand what legal implications some of those lawsuits to our city are going to bring.
Got it. Aside from the legal piece of it, you've got some people in Madison Park that are clearly upset about this. What do you want to say to those folks?
Yeah, you know, I've had meetings with them, and it's not, I would say not that they're upset, but they're, you know, questioning and wanting to understand, like, the infrastructure piece and making sure that the city can, the proposal neighborhood zones and the neighborhood centers that are proposed in the different areas, we have 4 in our district, can handle the type of growth that the city wants to have in the infrastructure piece. That's parks, that's drainage, that's water. People always think about comprehensive plan as housing, but it's much more than that, right? It's the whole comprehensive plan of the city.
And it sounds reasonable to ask about that.
Very reasonable, very reasonable. And so, you know, that's something that we're going to look into. I don't think it's unreasonable to ask about infrastructure, drainage, water, sewer, garbage, all those different pieces.
Okay, thank you. And I know there's a lot more ahead on this. Councilmember Solomon, I had a question come in from a viewer about transit-oriented development, building homes near transit, which is encouraged under the new state law. Eric asks this: transit-oriented development is new redlining, maximizing displacement in affordable communities and leaving low-density neighborhoods untouched. Why not upzone everywhere and have a displacement tax to discourage demolition of existing housing? Eric, put a little pepper on that one. But I just wanted to ask you about that. Some thoughts about transit-oriented development and the comprehensive plan, please.
Well, I've always felt that when it comes to any kind of development, make it make sense. Okay, and when I look at what's already in place in District 2, a lot of it is transit-oriented development. When I look at North Rainier, when I look at the MLK and Othello area, when I look at Rainier Beach, you've got a lot of density already. Okay, and I am always cautious about, just because we have density doesn't mean we have affordability.
Okay, that's okay.
At the same time, I do have pockets in the district where you have concentrations of low-income housing. Okay. Part of the plan that I want to see is spreading that out throughout the city. I don't want to see low-income housing only in D2. Okay, but you know, the question is about transit-oriented development. We need the connections to make it feasible, make it more, do we need to increase our east-west connections, for example, as opposed to just our north-south?
Short answer is yes, I would say. Okay.
Because we have very few lines that actually, bus lines that actually run east-west. Do we need to look at more of the the Metro van service to get people to different areas, to the light rail station, to the bus stations? Do we need to look at doing more rapid ride lines throughout the city? So, and when thinking about where is the housing now? How accessible is it to transit? Yeah, again, let's make it make sense. At the same time, when you're looking at other neighborhoods that have traditionally been single-family residential.
Yes.
Okay. I am concerned about displacement. I am concerned about people being able to stay in their homes. I am concerned about families being able to build generational wealth.
Okay.
I benefit from being in the home that my grandparents built, right?
See.
So I'm a beneficiary of generational wealth. So that's a big concern to me as well. Not just, transit-oriented development, but how do we keep people in their homes so they can build that wealth?
Okay, thank you. I know there's a lot still ahead with this, and I did want to ask one more viewer question to you, Councilmember Hollingsworth. Here's what we got. How does the comp plan really set us up for climate resiliency when we need both increased housing supply and Green New Deal investments? Specifically, the average lifespan differential between Northgate and South Park can be 5 years apart due to pollution. What's your plan?
Yeah, here's the plan, which I'm really excited about. Some of the comprehensive plan, what it does is transportation, getting people out of their car. So you just asked a question about the transit, orientation. Where does that go? Great example is the G line, looking at Madison Valley and connecting that to downtown, and it's fast, reliable, it's frequent, it's all these different things, and so that's the first piece. I think the second piece is trees. Having that viewer's probably talking about also like the tree canopy, and what does that look like in South Seattle and in Del Ridge,
Sure.
All these different places, and south of I-90. I can name all the neighborhoods, but saying south of I-90 is easier. So tree canopy, and also walkable neighborhoods where we put in grocery stores and corner stores and small businesses and all those different things. So those are different things that the comprehensive plan does and sets up. And so we're going to continue to work on those.
Okay, got it.
And could I actually just going to add to that is, it also comes down to how do you design the building? How do you build it so that you allow for green roofs? To allow for natural light.
Yeah. The built environment is a big part of your background.
How do we alter the built environment to take into consideration making the buildings more efficient, more green, if you will?
Okay, thank you very much. Is there another public hearing set yet? I know you're looking for another one.
We're looking for one. The first one we had went 5.5 hours. We had to cut it a little short because of the weather, and so we want to hear from the people that we didn't hear from. Okay. A lot of those people towards the end were our young folks that just signed up and we couldn't get to them, and so we want to prioritize them first. We're working on a date, so please tell the public, please stay engaged. Okay. Please continue to send us emails, but we're working on it.
All right, we'll be back in touch on that. I wanted to talk a little bit about the social housing measure that voters just passed, Prop 1A. This measure would institute a new payroll tax on companies paying out salaries above $1 million to pay for more affordable housing. Social housing is the system here. The council put together an opposition measure to this, Prop 1B, but it failed by a pretty large margin, the ballot box. Councilmember Hollingsworth, what's your plan to implement a proposal the council didn't really want, but the voters clearly did?
Yeah, voters responded. They want housing. They want social housing. We want to make it successful. That's the bottom line. So Seattle has been such a giving city. We voted on $1 billion levy for housing. People want to know accountability and transparency. How many new houses is that going to build? The same with social housing. People want it to be built. They want it at a low cost. They want transparency. They want accessibility, and they want to make sure it's done in a fast timeline. Mm-hmm. So we're going to be working hard to make sure that it is successful and that we make sure that it's done at a very cost, efficiency level.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Solomon, another housing question for you. This one in relation to the proposal Council President Nelson has brought up, adding more housing to the Soto neighborhood just west of your district. Mm-hmm. Port of Seattle's fought back hard against this. They're worried about impacts to freight. They hammered out a deal with the city to prevent housing in this area 2 years ago. Dan has this question. Housing in Soto. It seems that proposals to create low-income housing in industrial areas is frequently shot down by people who believe believe that the areas are unsafe and unhealthy. What do you think about this criticism?
I've been getting information from all sides on this issue. So I've talked to the port, I've talked to Council President Nelson, I've talked to the unions who are in favor of it, I've talked to folks who are opposed to it. I'm gathering more information.
Okay.
Because one of the things that I'm thinking about is, again, what's the infrastructure there to support housing, grocery, library, transit. Not only that, I'm thinking about the geology of the area because, again, SODO was fill, right?
Yep.
So if we have a major earthquake, how many of those structures that are actually in SODO are going to be able to withstand a big shake?
Yeah.
So, again, if I said before, let's make it make sense.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm not only looking at, who's for it, who's against it, what their concerns are, but I'm also looking, can the geography support housing in that area?
It's a very interesting question. I did want to make sure I got in this question, though, about a big vote a couple weeks ago on the council about crowd control, crowd management policies for the Seattle Police Department, their use of so-called less lethal weapons like blast balls, pepper spray. Councilmember Hollingsworth, you opposed this final legislation that the majority of the council approved. What were your concerns, and where does the SPD go from here?
Yeah, first of all, let me thank Councilmember Kettle. He did a phenomenal job behind the scenes, like getting everyone's concerns, trying to figure out different amendments to get everybody to a yes. So I just want to start with there. The second thing is I just had 3 non-negotiables. One was throwing away from people. The second one was throwing underhand. The third was the mayor's approval.
Yeah, the blast balls we're talking about here.
Yes, absolutely. And I know that amendment passed to have a state of emergency that Councilmember Soccer proposed that went through for the mayor to declare a state of emergency. I just at the time just didn't think it was a priority and the right time to do it, not necessarily meaning that I didn't support it, but just thought that it wasn't a priority should have been a priority for us right now.
Okay, got it. Councilmember Solomon, some thoughts on this? I should point out that putting this crowd control measure in place is the last thing on the list for Seattle to complete to get out from under the federal consent decree it's been under since 2012. Your thoughts about this, why you supported it? Does it make Seattle safer?
Well, again, as I explained when we were taking this vote, I'm coming at this with the perspective of having worked with the Seattle Police Department for close to 35 years, having interacted with officers, having heard their stories from when they're on the line and having to deal with these kind of situations. And when I look at the legislation as proposed and amended, it did provide those protections for free speech, free assembly, free expression. At the same time, when we saw before when the less lethal weapons were banned, it basically allowed officers with sticks and guns. Okay. And while the weapons we're specifically talking about, like the blast balls and the CS gas, those are absolutely last resort things that if all else fails, then the use can be authorized. Okay. At the same time, I think it's an important distinction to determine between the authorization to use and the authorization to deploy.
I see.
Okay. And the officers I talk to, they don't want to use these things.
Yeah.
They definitely don't want to use CS because it's not contained.
Tear gas.
Everyone is going to be
affected by that. Yeah.
Affected area, whether they were involved in the crowd or not. Blast balls, in terms of how they're deployed, yes, deployed away from people. Usually you roll it. There may be some circumstance where they have to be done overhead, but that's the decision that should be left to the incident commander on scene who's dealing with the dynamic situation.
Thanks. So, I have 20 seconds left.
Okay.
The one sentence you want to say to our new chief, Sean Barnes, of the SPD, what should his top priority be? What do you got?
Relational policing.
I like that. That was short. What else?
Welcome to Seattle. And
well, that too, yeah.
Welcome to Seattle, and community connections and relationships mean everything to the city.
Thank you for that. We will see what happens next. That's Councilmember Mark Solomon. That's Councilmember Joy Hollingsworth. I'm Brian Callanan. We will see you next time on Council Edition.